Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 6th season, we are looking at the Avengers. I'm Andy Nelson from the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network.
And I'm Pete Wright. And today, Puny God! Puny God!
Today we are talking about minute 121, which begins with Nat's tuck and roll landing and ends with Eric's big reveal, almost. Back on the show from a few weeks ago, we've got Lachlan Thiele from the Quiet on Set podcast. Lachlan, hello.
Hello, my friends. How are we doing?
Oh, so good.
Another week of big moments happening in this movie. Of course, I would ask you, why did you pick this particular minute? But I kind of have a sense that it's probably the puny God bit.
The better question is, how were you first to pick your minutes? Because there's no way this one was just left.
I have no idea when you guys said, go through this list, see what minutes you'd like. And I've picked, obviously, some good minutes earlier on, some nice speeches, some gorgeous moments. I see this free and I'm like, hang on a second. How does this have my favorite subtle joke, my favorite joke, and one of the darkest lines in the entire film? I'm just like, hang on, dibs. I was like, this one, go, let's go. Let me take it before it gets taken by somebody else. So it's incredible. Unreal.
Well, it's going to be a fun one to talk about for sure. Let's start at the very beginning of this minute, though. We've just finished this race up from essentially ground level all the way to the top of Stark Tower. As Natasha, we're following her, we cut from minute 120 as she did her fantastic front flip off of the chariot. And now we come mid-move as she lands on the roof of Stark Tower, just proving how incredibly gymnastic and nimble she is and how great she is at timing something like this when leaping off of a flying vehicle over a building 800 feet high.
Whatever. That's still how I get into bed every night, Andy. I don't know what you're so impressed by.
The film decides to cut out the 3 attempts she already did where she got caught and they flew back around to do the jump again. Yeah.
Right.
And she does her hair flick, the good old Natasha Romanoff hair flick. She has to do one of those in every single movie. There's not a single one. I don't think she does that. And then how incredible is it that she lands, does the hair flick, and then we also have the best, and this is my favorite subtle joke of the film, match cut to Loki doing the same hair flick. It's so spectacular. Oh man, it's so good.
It's so
the only thing that disappoints me ever so slightly with that shot is that he does it so quickly the cameraman wasn't quite ready, and his head kind of gets chopped off as they kind of try to catch and reframe it. But it is so funny, and it's a perfect match cut too. It makes me laugh every time we cut from her to him, and they both are flipping their gorgeous hair.
I'm assuming we're all in the same boat saying that Loki did it better this time, right? Because it was definitely better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Hiddleston's definitely got the move. But you can tell it's practiced, You can tell he sat in his apartment, his house, his room, wherever they are, practicing this. And that gives me almost as much delight as seeing the final product.
How fun. I mean, I always laugh at stories about actors, spouses or partners, like in the stories they had. Like this, the one I always go to is Mike Myers talking about how annoyed his wife was with him when he discovered his Shrek voice and was walking around all the time practicing that voice. And she was just like, for God's sakes, stop talking in that damn voice. But I think about moments like this, is this something that, Scarlett Johansson's, I don't know if she was married at this particular point in time, but whoever she was with, whoever Tom Hiddleston was there was this point where they're like, yeah, no, I'd give that a 5 out of 10. Nah, yeah.
All right. Okay, do it again. But this time more roll.
Yeah.
Right. It's so funny. I just love watching this moment between them. Now, I do have a question. When Loki flips his head up and looks up, is he meant to be looking at her? Because, I don't know. My sense of the building is like the way that he landed, she would actually be behind him now. I don't know. Did either of you, what were you two thinking as far as his eye line?
Behind him or at least at a very minimum lower than he is. Because she lands on like gravel. Like it feels like and he's on finished floor.
Right, but she's at the tippity-top of the building, like way above him.
Oh, yeah. I get the feeling that he's looking out like over the city and she is, then she's got to be behind him because the slope is going up behind him.
I'm not sure, I think that it's just for style points. I think that he doesn't care where he looks or who he's looking at as long as somebody sees. And in this case, it's actually Hulk, but he doesn't care.
But Hulk doesn't care, yeah.
Well, that's actually a really good question. Is that what he's supposed to be looking at? Like he does his hair flip specifically for Hulk, not as a reaction to Natasha. This is like it's like a handoff hair flip. She hair flips to him, he hair flips to Hulk.
Well, it could be. At first, I was thinking that, he was pissed off at Clint because, he had that exploding arrow that blew him up and had him land here, essentially. And so I thought, oh, maybe he's looking at Clint. But then if he were looking at Clint, he would be looking like way down, not kind of up and out. And I guess that's why it's a weird look to have. I mean, it is a great look. It captures the hair and the move and everything well. And it's almost like a prep for, Hulk. So I don't know. It's just one of those funky things. Or here's another thing. Like, I don't know if he knew actually that she jumped off of her chariot. Like, did he know she was trying to get to the top? Maybe he's trying to find the chariot that she was on to see if she's still on it.
Yeah, right. So this hair flip is just an homage hair flip. Because he doesn't even know where she
doesn't know she flipped her hair.
Right.
He's trying to preemptively do the hair flip.
Yes, right. Or maybe he thinks she's somewhere incapable of hair flipping, and so he's doing it for her. It's like a charity hair flip.
Because he saw her fall off, and she's coming back around now to like do the actual land. So he's doing the flip for her.
Right.
No, this is the stupidest thing we've ever talked about on the show, I think, maybe.
Hair flips?
I mean, I'm here for it, but...
Yeah. Again, the building here, I'm sure we talked about this in the minute preceding this. We're recording these out of order, but in minute 120, that is the point where Clint spots her and Loki flying down 42nd Street and sees them start angling up toward the top of Stark Tower. His building, again, 414 feet, that's where he is. And he's pretty much looking straight when he sees them, takes aim, all of that sort of stuff. The MetLife building, the real one, is 808 feet high. Now, looking at Stark Tower as is, when you compare the views from the film with the views from reality, the MetLife building and the Chrysler building, they're pretty comparable in both cases. So I'm just going to assume Stark Tower is as tall as the MetLife building, which means that they have to go up 400 feet in order to be up here by the time the arrow hits and blows him up and everything. And it's one of these funky things that I suppose we just buy because it's a movie. But it was a 400-foot climb practically straight up that the two of them just did. So also just something to remember.
They did fine.
They did fine.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, as we've already pointed out, Hulk makes his appearance here. This is the, last time we saw him, he had just punched Thor in the Grand Central Terminal after the death of that poor Leviathan that they caused. Lachlan, we have decided that the Leviathan are merely the sea cows of the skies and are being used and abused by the Chitauri in this particular situation, and that they actually have no control over the decisions they're making. They're just being piloted.
If you're asking me to sign some sort of petition, I'm already on it. Let me,
Save the Leviathan advocacy show, right, is where we are right
now. .org.
We've shifted direction.
Yeah, .org, right.
Yeah, right. So anyway, that was the last time we saw him. And now, I guess, they were in Grand Central Terminal, which is directly below. So I guess it could make sense that he comes outside and sees Loki flying and decides, hey, I'm going to go up there and beat him up. And hence, here he is. I don't know what he'd been doing the last 3 minutes, just wandering aimlessly, but here he is up here, and wow, just jumps right into Loki, and away we go with this particular pounding.
I love the way you said that, as if they were two distant lovers flying across galaxies for this meeting. How terrifying is that Hulk scream as he jumps up? It's just, man. And how long was he screaming for? From the floor, or was he only screaming from like 10 meters away, right?
From the ground, he's been screaming.
It echoes tremendously.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But this part is incredible, right? Because you see Hulk come out of nowhere, and it's him and Loki, right? It's the big bad, and it immediately lands into this speech. And there's no music for this first few moments. Starts talking, and the music kicks in, and you're like, here we go. Here's the big bad speech at the end or during the fight, and he's starting quite strong, enough. I mean, I think they cut some audio in between, because I think it goes enough. You are all of you beneath me.
Right.
It doesn't sound right, unless he's just tired and, English is his second language, because he's obviously from Asgard and Asgardians have their own. So, he could just be messing up his big speech that he's been prepping, but...
Knowing they love talking in kind of this pretend, like, old English style that is just, it all feels very screenwriterly. Like, none of it really feels like they're pulling directly from Shakespeare or anything. It's kind of like what they think that it should sound like. And so, yeah, you get things like that. You are all of you beneath me. And it's like, yeah, I guess that could be how you'd say it then.
Yeah.
When you think about it too long.
It does, of course, give us the entree into another one. If it's not the peak Tig Notaro writing minute, it is certainly in canon as one of the many that we've talked about in this show. This is about as Joss Whedon as you could possibly get in terms of the vibe and sense of humor and the kind of thing you would expect from that pen. Is this almost literal rug pull on Loki in this conversation. And I just, it's one of those things that I am as superficial as they come, and I hate myself for loving this minute as much as I do. It is so fun and funny, and I remember the first time I saw it in the theater, and I was like, it's one of those, kind of, I'm edge of my seat laughing so hard kind of a minute, because it is an exhilarating minute to see these characters do this thing, particularly Hulk. Of course, it's filled with great complex feelings, because Hulk saying puny god leans even more heavily in on the fact that Hulk is transforming into this sentient creature that I don't love as much as crazy risky creature that we've talked about for 100 minutes in a row. It's so fantastic that I'm willing to give it a pass.
Lachlan, do you remember the first time you saw the Avengers in the theaters? Do you remember this moment? Did it hit you as strongly as it did Pete?
Yeah, I do. I remember going to see this small independent film, The Avengers, back in 2012. Not deciding to go, should I go see that new Spider-Man movie, or should I go see Avengers? And I was like, I'll go see Avengers.
Support the little guy.
I've already seen Spider-Man. I know that's going to be a big film, but I don't know about this one. And yeah, I guess I don't really have much of a memory of villains getting this treatment, right? If this is the big bad, right, and they're just going to then bring him down to a joke level, I thought, no one's safe, right? Mm-hmm. No one is safe in this universe to just be this big evil and then get the piss taken out of them. So I do remember it, just bang, 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 the whole audience erupts. It's so funny. Everyone's laughing. I'm laughing. This is like the best joke. And I don't think if this joke was in here, I feel like the MCU humor would be just a little bit different. It wouldn't be, at any moment, a joke can just appear, even in the most serious of moments. And I think that that's what this does. It just sets up this cinematic universe of humor.
I like that.
It's actually a really good question. I'm curious your thoughts, both of you guys, on the influence that Tig Notaro's sense of humor had on the rest of the movies that followed. Do you see ripples that in ways that Avengers defined the rest of these movies?
Yeah, no, 100%. Without this humor, I guess you have Iron Man's sort of ego humor, right? Where he's so confident that it's funny in some situations, and he's always got a joke ready to go. But Avengers obviously has this, I don't want to say slapstick, but this very out of nowhere left field humor, right? At the end of a serious scene, joke. At the end of a big fight, joke. It's this sort of very formulaic roller coaster of action and humor, and it sort of starts to become more solidified as you go through the MCU.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I'd land with it too. I mean, it definitely is something that runs strongly through the Iron Man films. And I mean, I suppose to a certain extent you're getting that in some of the other films, but I feel like it really starts becoming more refined here, and something that you really see them tapping into as something they want to use as kind of their Marvel brand. I mean, we have essentially the exact same setup in Guardians of the Galaxy, where you have Ronan as he's doing his big speech, and then suddenly you have Star-Lord doing his dancing. It's like the exact same kind of
You're right.
Setup with this heavy moment that is kind of shifted into this comedic beat very strangely that is really funny and off-putting, and it's something that kind of became part of the definition of what went into kind of making a film in the Marvel universe. And I think that it works. And I guess you could argue with different directors coming in, different writers, sometimes better than others. But I do think by the time you're getting here, it does feel like it's a little more fine-tuned.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Like you have the Favreau thumbprint, right, which is I think all over the MCU to this day. You have the Tig Notaro thumbprint that is very much sort of responsible for solidifying that roller coaster of action comedy. And I think James Gunn, was the next sort of major influence, like, because we had so many of those movies and they just became so bonkers, right? Like that added a next level of this bright and colorful vaudevillian kind of filmmaking to the MCU. But I think I feel like these are the directors that made these sort of indelible marks on the MCU, and everybody else is still sort of playing in the playground.
I'd say the Russo brothers also, but I don't know if they're...
Oh, God, of course. Yeah, the Russo brothers.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about the Russo brothers is, and we've had this argument before on the Saturday Matinee, like the Russo brothers were great for what they did in the MCU, and almost everything else that they've done or produced has not been as good, like by a significant margin. And so I look at those movies and I see those first and foremost as MCU movies, and secondarily Russo brothers movies. I see these others as sort of directorial marks and sort of screenwriter marks.
Sure.
The question now raises as well, you obviously talk about all of these thumbs coming in and all of these styles coming in, so many thumbs. Now we've gotten to 20, 30 plus films, all of these new directors have come in. Are there too many thumbs in the MCU? Is it feel a bit too much they're stealing from different people and it's just this weird roller coaster of formula now, right? Like, why is it all of a sudden getting extremely dark like it does in, they try to do in Thor: The Dark World and Civil War, like these really dark themes, and then they try to do these James Gunn comedy parts, and then it's still got to be, the original Avengers, fun, lighthearted, and, is there too much in there now? And is that where the MCU has kind of fallen off in the past few movies? Are they trying to go too much formula?
I definitely think the formula thing is part of it. I don't know if the directors end up being as much a part of that I think maybe to a certain extent, but largely I think because there is so much Kevin Feige as kind of the MCU overlord who's really kind of like dictating what everybody's doing and how they're structuring it and everything, and bringing in some of these smaller directors who don't necessarily even understand how to shoot some of these big action sequences and really are relying on their second unit directors and those teams to kind of build it all. And then again, Kevin Feige to kind of guide them along, quote, guide them along, but really kind of probably in a little bit of more of a dictatorial fashion. And I think that when you get the James Gunns, Taika Waititi's, those sorts of people coming along, they have a little bit more of their directorial stamp. But I still think that largely it still is very much the Kevin Feige mold that everybody's trying to fit into. And I think, I don't know, what I see as the kind of the issue that really ended when phase 3 ended is that they kind of told this grand story that they'd been building. And I just feel like they didn't really have a good set of stories structured that could work separately and then also together. Like nothing that they've done since Endgame and then I guess the denouement with Spider-Man has felt connected they're all connected in kind of like little overbearing ways at times, but nothing feels as like it's building to something definitive. And that's the weirdest thing. Like you get all these stories and it's just like, I don't know how Eternals really connects to anything, and it's just, it kind of becomes this big amalgam mess and of this multiverse. And I just don't think, I don't think it's working as well.
So I think what you're saying is that the directors of the MCU are the space cows, and Kevin Feige is the one with the whip. So the spacecows.org, sign your petition, help save these directors.
Save the spacecows.org.
Save the space cows.
Find us there. That's right. So a couple other questions that come up with this moment between Hulk and Loki. First, there's this directorial tool that is used at times that some directors use where if you can't see something in the frame, it doesn't exist. Like the world of the viewer is kind of the world that the filmmakers are going to let you have. And then there are also other filmmakers who have the view of if you don't see it in the frame, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's out there. And it's just the camera is just not pointing at it at that particular moment. This is very much the film. Several times now we've seen where if you can't see it in the frame, it doesn't exist. And this is a moment where Loki, he's yelling at Hulk and suddenly he's pulled by his legs. Loki doesn't see Hulk's arm reaching for him at all. He's just staring and screaming at him, but Hulk has to be incredibly fast to like stick his arm low enough under the frame to like grab him by his legs and pull, and Loki doesn't see him or react in any way. And I think that this is one of those, just another example. And it's just, I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong either way. Depending on how directors do it. Spielberg is very much, I won't say always, but often is one of these, if it's not in the frame, it doesn't exist sort of filmmakers. Mm-hmm. Lachlan, is this something that you notice in films? And is it something that you read one way or the other?
I like to think that directors flow in between. I don't think they're always one or the other. Some definitely try to stick to one particular technique, but in this case, obviously, it breaks a little bit because either, as you said, Hulk is very quick and, runs across the room, or he's sort of just like hovering over the camera operator and the boom operator and just trying to like contort his body, and he's just ready to grab Loki's leg and just pulls him under the rug. There's different ways of looking at it, but I'd like to think that this one, Hulk is there because you have that shot of him just before. He's sort of in the distance of Loki, but you never know how far away, which is why I think it's such a rug pull, because you never see a two shot of them. You only see single, one of Loki, one of Hulk. You don't know the distance. Now we're picking into the sort of the blocking of these characters. We don't know the space that they're in, and this is where This podcast is interesting because you have the minute to break down. You have to figure out where they are, how tall that building is. and you have to bring it into reality.
Yeah.
And what the other thing you don't see is that Hulk is a close-up magic aficionado, and with his left hand, he's just pulled a bouquet of distractions. And so what Loki's looking at is the bouquet while Hulk pulls the rug. So
as you just did on the show, so we don't pay attention to this question anymore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Such a beautiful bouquet.
Do you see what happened there? I'm so glad.
Okay, now here's another question. This is something that that you brought up, Lachlan. The idea of our villain and how in this particular case, like the air is really taken out of our villain, like literally in this particular point. Loki had been kind of our primary antagonist over the course of the film. And this is kind of the end of that, although we still have obviously the Chitauri army outside and the hole still open in the sky. Is there a sense of shift of antagonist in the film going from, okay, he's been kind of defeated? Does it diminish Loki in any way by doing it this way? And is there a sense that, we're meant to really, have a bigger appreciation for this generic Chitauri army and what they're doing?
I don't know if it's to shift the focus because there's a massive hole in the sky and they've been trying to bring attention to it, but also Loki is doing some evil stuff, and that's more interesting, right? To have a character to lock onto. I mean, the whole conversation of is the big old hole in the sky technique overdone in these movies, because every time there's a big fight, there's a big hole in the sky and you have to shut that down. So, I just think that if they don't put down Loki, it would have been a bit messy to have the whole team separated to go fight Loki. Half of you fight Loki, half of you take down the hole in the sky, because that's sort of important, because that's about to expand the entire universe, because there's a big old universe out there, and, that's... You can't just do everything at once. So taking down Loki, yes, brings him down a level. Maybe they knew they were going to bring him from the evil villain status into this anti-hero, sort of a hero status, and move him into the MCU that way. And then go focus on Tesseract hole in the sky.
Yeah, I think that's a really, I think that's a really interesting shift that happens. And I think you're right, Lachlan. Like, ultimately, to me, this is the obvious compression sleeve around the third act of the story, right? We have to start shutting down these elements one at a time. I think the question becomes, for me, is shutting down Loki before shutting the giant hole in the sky, does that diminish the end of the movie and the battle of against the Chitauri, or diminish Loki's presence in the movie? Because it's really this choice to make Loki a joke that transforms our perception of Loki for the rest of the MCU, right? It's what makes him ultimately be able to make the transition to likable down the road, because he was beaten in a joke. And I think that is there's a lot of weight and sort of responsibility to that character ultimately. And I'm recognizing they probably didn't know what they were going to do with Loki at the time they made this movie. But it also, this sequence opens up the opportunity to do things they didn't expect to do with Loki. So to me, it was opportunistic. It didn't necessarily, break the end of the movie for me, but I do think they took our big bad and they made him comic fodder. And I don't necessarily, certainly didn't think about it at the time, but I don't feel very strongly that they did his evilness service by playing him out that way. How about that?
Here's an interesting one then. Would you rather them kill him off like they do with so many villains and then end the story? Because I think that having a comedic ending and have him live on just allows him to come back, whether it be good or bad. But some of these other films, dead. No way they're coming back. And it's like, but I'd like just a little bit more, right? Just a little bit more.
Well, and I guess that's what I'm saying, but with opportunistic, right? It gives them choices, especially because they had to have known at least, at a very minimum, how charismatic Tom Hiddleston is at portraying this character. Like, they have to have seen that coming while making this movie and thought maybe someday we can do something. That's just what that's the feel I get. And I'm sure I'm retconning some of that, but
well, I mean, it's his second opportunity to be the villain of a film. So obviously they already had kind of decided that, and presumably already were thinking of, how they were going to involve him in Thor: The Dark World. So I have a feeling they probably already had that sense with him as a performer. But, to your point, Lachlan, I always prefer it when they're able to find a way to keep the villain alive because, one, it happens all the time in the comic books. Like, you never kill villains off. They're always back. And two, I think it makes for a more interesting ending when you have to figure out a way to keep them alive, catch them. I think that it allows for something a little more interesting to allow for resolution.
Well, and it does give us something that we'll see in a few minutes, which is the literal comic frame ending to Loki's story in the Avengers, with all the Avengers over him, which is, that is delightful comic homage right there. I mean, that's stripped from the pages of the book.
It is one of those things, Pete, to your point. I do think as the villain, the primary driving force villain of our story, it does seem strange that he ends up being defeated before the Chitauri. And, it does kind of take that I don't know, weirdly, I always find at the end of the film from this point, I find it a little flat. And I just wonder if that's part of the reason. Like, it's like if Thor had somehow gone back to Asgard to defeat Loki on the Bifrost before coming back to Midgard to defeat the Destroyer. Like it's kind of like it's a little bit backwards. Or a video game where you defeat the main villain before you defeat one of his minions. So there is something odd about it as far as the structure, but it does allow for a really funny moment, and that's what I think. It's hard to pass up because they made it so funny.
So funny. Well, and to that point, maybe it's that's the ultimate sleight of hand of this movie, because once Loki is ridiculed as a joke, it does allow us a little bit of a change of attention to maybe there's something more to who they're fighting after all. And that is where we need to go with our attention anyway, that there is a bigger bad over Loki. And so, insofar as we're looking at the microcosm of the Loki relationship, is there room to grant that maybe the Chitauri, if you change the perspective and think like, oh, Thanos is also up there somewhere, does that allow you to see the movie maybe as less flat or maybe as part of a larger, less flat arc?
Well, okay, so there was that deleted scene right before Loki attacks Natasha, when he goes back into communication with the other, again, as a connection to somebody else that he is kind of answering to, right? And it's like that sense of, whatever the conversation was, the point is, that was that moment that was kind of tying him into, there is still somebody above you. And I do wonder, I don't know if that scene necessarily carried the weight that it would have needed to in order, like, I think that because of the way that they really have latched onto by this point with just 6 films of saving things for those mid-credits and post-credit sequences, that's something that they really want to emphasize as being important. And having something at the end of this that does kind of reveal the Thanos moment.
Yeah.
The fact that they're saving that, I wonder if that does end up kind of, making it less powerful because we're saving it.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Curiouser and curiouser.
The last note here is just how much can an Asgardian take? Like, these people. Like,
so much.
I just always go back to their battle on Jotunheim in Thor. And 3 of them at least had to go to the healing room when they got back to Asgard because of the injuries that they sustained and everything. And so I know they can be hurt, but this is Hulk who's smashing him like repeatedly, like a ragdoll into the floor. And while his little wheezy breath makes me laugh to no end. It is one of those things that where I'm like, later, just moments later in the film, he's going to be like walking through the building with them, and I'm like, maybe on a stretcher.
Yeah. That little wheeze of comedy, it just sounds like a wheeze of pain. Like if you just take away the joke, right, of Hulk and cut to him sort of embedded in the floor as if you didn't know Hulk was there, you'd probably want to call for medical support.
It's a triple joke. It's the physical comedy of smashing him down.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Hulk puny god, which the word puny in itself is just a great word, right?
It's a funny word.
You say it with your face. Your nose screws up and Hulk does the same thing, puny god. And then you have that little wheeze. So you have a bit of comedy from them together individually as well. It's a nice little joke. Obviously, we spoke about how the joke might not be the best option for the film, but the joke itself is
a good joke.
Very good.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it is. It's very funny. And it really kind of allows for this whole battle with Loki to kind of come to an end in this moment of pain as Hulk walks off. And that takes us back to the roof as we're now back with Nat, who has survived her tuck and roll. She is up there and she's looking at this machine that Erik has built and realizes that Erik is there too. And he's kind of giving her this clue that the scepter is the thing that perhaps they need to actually fix things. And because, as he says, the Tesseract can't fight, you can't protect against yourself.
What?
What are those lines? Yeah, I mean, so this whole, we're setting up kind of the end of the film, the closing of this portal. What do you think of kind of this setup that we're getting here? Obviously, we don't quite get to reveal exactly what Erik's talking about when he says, I think I did, as far as I knew what I was doing. There's going to be a reveal that we'll talk about in tomorrow's minute. But as far as kind of this setup of Nat going up here and trying to figure out how to close this, I mean, does this work for you, Lachlan, the way that we're jumping into this section here?
Again, I've said this multiple times in different places. I'm a show, don't tell kind of guy. Like, show me the clue, don't tell me it. And even if you're telling me it and he's like hallucinating out of his, mind magic that he's been put under for a while, don't tell me like directly, scepter, tesseract, end. That's basically what he's saying, right?
Yeah.
I just wish it wasn't like that. I don't know how I would like them to show me. This is the part that it's probably the easier way of just saying, go there, collect this, end the portal in the sky. But yeah, it's probably the quickest way to save time. The movie's over in our eyes, right? The bad is dead. So we need to quickly move on to the next bad. Don't waste time, showing them how to end it. Tell them.
Yeah, I think that's part of the issue. Is it does feel so written through all of this. It feels like a cutscene from a video game to like just explain what you have to do in your next scene, right? It's like you gotta get down there and get the scepter, and then you gotta put it in here, and we'll shut the whole thing down.
I just don't understand though. Like, even if you give them the grace of saying, I don't we know we're doing some exposition dump. Even the exposition dump doesn't make any sense. That line, you guys, Loki's scepter, the energy, the Tesseract can't fight. They're doing a piss poor job of exposition dumping on us.
Yeah.
Maybe that was their trick. They're trying to make it really confusing exposition.
So that it doesn't sound like exposition anymore.
Exactly. It's just confusing us.
There was a guy behind the camera with cue cards to Skellen, and he was like flicking between the cards, and Skellen's going, the scepter, the energy, Tesseract can't fight.
Right. That's it.
Yeah, that's what happened in this scene. It wasn't actually scripted. It was some guy writing it live.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
God, it's just so bad.
Yeah. I suppose that considering where we're going with Erik in the future films, I suppose there could be some element of looking at this like his brain is already pretty scrambled. Like he can't even really get a sentence out. I don't think that they're setting that up. Like it really doesn't seem like they're trying to, but that would have been the only thing that I could think might have actually made this work in a better way, where we see just how scrambled Erik is, and he's trying to actually get something out but can't. Like then it could have been a little bit more of an interesting scene. But as you said, Lachlan, we are at this point where our villain is down, and the story we just need to get this thing closed now. So I think they're probably just trying to take as many shortcuts as they can from this point forward, just to get us to that point where Tony's, chasing the nuke up there.
Nat could fix it too. Her next line, "It's not your fault. Doctor, you don't know what you're saying." Instead, she says, "You didn't know what you were doing." Just have her call him crazy. That's all I want, is somebody in this damn movie to call Selvig nuts.
And I can't help but wish that there was still this moment of Selvig on the roof having that kind of the crazy Warhol Dayglow moment.
He didn't get this Dayglow moment.
He didn't get, just like Clint did. Like, why not? He should have been up here, like, fighting the spell that he'd been under all this time.
Oh, man, he should have been in Sergeant Pepper's. Like, he should have been absolutely nuts, given how long he was under.
Yep.
All right.
Well, it has been a great minute. Any last thoughts from you, Lachlan, on this, or really the film, because this is our last chance to chat with you about it?
Aww. Erik's last line, it's terrifying in a way. I say this is the darkest moment, even though it's through a bunch of mumbo-jumbo coming out of his voice. He does say, actually, I think I did, right? How dark is that? This entire time, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was doing something bad, but he was doing it for science. And maybe that's the villain of the film. Science.
And that's what Pete and I have been talking about this whole time. Like, maybe this is why he doesn't go through that whole pop art Warhol thing, because he really would, like, if Loki hadn't taken control of his mind, he might have just been going along with all this anyway, because he was so fascinated with the Tesseract. He loves the science, and the opportunity to kind of explore it this way might have been right up his alley. And we've talked about, like, Erik seems like a perfect setup for a really interesting villain at some point. It's just they've never used him in that way. But I really think that there is something interesting with his, like, as you said, this line, there's something dark in there. I think that would be fun to explore.
Instead, he went on a trip and never recovered because he went crazy and never recovered the character arc that could have been. But who knows? In an alternative multiverse, we might get him back because we have that expansive universe now in the MCU. So, yeah, I guess to what you said earlier about this film, this movie is very important. This movie, without it, there's no MCU. If this film flopped, I'm sorry, Kevin Feige's on the streets. He wouldn't be the shepherd of the space cows that he is now. This film is it's, even though I don't think it's aged very well in comparison to some of the other earlier MCU films, I think there are some things to this film that didn't make it to this rewatch that I did for this recording, and I go, ooh, it's not that great. But without this film, there's no MCU.
Truth.
I think that pretty much sums it up in a very succinct way. So, well, Lachlan, we have had a fantastic time talking with you today and over the course of the season. Thank you so much for joining us here.
No, thank you guys for having me. I love what you guys do here. I love speaking about Marvel. It's such an exciting topic.
Tell everybody,
awesome, man. We appreciate you.
Absolutely. Tell everybody again about your podcast, where people can tune in.
Yes, I'm on the Quiet on Set podcast. We speak about the latest coming out in the movie scene, whether that be Marvel, whether that be the latest A24 film, which may be a collaboration eventually in the future. Marvel A24, the most interesting art house studio power. That would be incredible, right? But you can listen to us.
I think Ari Aster is on deck, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure, right? Can you imagine the trip that would be, eh?
As a director, I love it in Marvel.
But we're on pretty much any podcast platform and on YouTube as well. You can catch us anywhere there.
Fantastic. We'll have the links in the show notes. Check those out, everybody. And we certainly appreciate it that you've been joining us all this time, Lachlan. We will be back tomorrow. We will have actually Lester Clark and Keenan Diaz back in the house to talk about Minute 122. So thanks, everybody. And Pete, thanks as always.
Tomorrow, Andy, you get to see what Iron Man and I have in common. Weaponized thighs.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Message to the World by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show.